I just want to say that you could make a million changes to this movie and it wouldn't be perfect. You would really need to take this movie from the ground up to completely fix all issues. This video is more to show how it could have been a lot better. So first off, I'd leave the shots of the city. They last just long enough to where they're not too long, but I would significantly cut down the CGI car scene. It goes on way too long. They should have focused on making 2 to 3 seconds of really good CGI footage and then end it there. This is pretty much the first real shot of the movie and it's the worst effect of the movie. A big issue for me is that the CGI was really misused here. Next, the shocker action scene is fine. I'd probably make a few tweaks to it, but I'd leave it mostly the same. This scene is fine, for a fan film at least. But after this we run into a continuity error, or I think it's a continuity error, or just bad writing. Peter is late to meet MJ, Gwen and Harry at the movies, but when he goes to meet them it's nighttime, and when he fought Shocker it was daytime. So what was he doing that caused him to be late? You'd like to assume it was because he was fighting Shocker, but it was a completely different time of day, so there must have been something else. They could have fixed this by filming the scene at daytime or dusk. Overall though, I like the dialogue in the scene. It's like the only part of the movie where Peter actually acts like Peter, and it's good. I'd cut out the narration for this sequence. This movie tells way more than it shows, and that's an issue. I actually think the movie is quite decent, right up until it hits the credits. That's where issues start to arise. Starting with this scene, where every bit of hope or faith you have in Peter being likable gets completely shattered. He is a massive jerk for really no justifiable reason. So how would I go about fixing this scene? I'd have him be really quiet as he is in the original, pretty much the same, but right as he gets mad at her, I'd just make him walk away silently and say, sorry, I have to go. I think it would get the point across without making Peter look like the bad guy, because in this scene he absolutely looks like the bad guy. Peter being unnecessarily mean and rude is a big issue with this film, made even worse by the movie expecting you to sympathize with Peter at multiple points. Same thing with the scene where Peter meets Harry. Why is he being the aggressor here? I'd understand if this was a film like The Joker, but it isn't. You just can't make Peter this unlikable and then expect us to root for him later on. I think this was a bad choice of script for our first introduction to these characters. We at least needed like a first movie where we see them being nice to then go into this type of film where they're not so nice. And unfortunately the pre-credit scene, while the best part of the movie, is nowhere near enough. And so it's pretty hard for me to try and think of a way to rewrite this movie without just cutting scenes like this entirely. I just don't understand what was the point of this scene. All it does is paint Peter in more of a bad light. I guess to show how Harry is coping with the loss of Gwen, which is good. I just wish the movie put more of an emphasis on that and less of Peter being a jerk. I'd very simply change it by making it that when Harry gets up, instead of walking to the sink, he just walks out the door. Also, I forgot to mention, during the graveyard scene, I wouldn't have MJ give Peter the letter for the terminally ill child. It'll make sense later. I'd remove all the scenes of Harry just idly walking around New York. They're pretty pointless and just add to the runtime, which this movie is way too long, by the way. Now, the Spider-Man bridge scene, initially when I saw it, I was amazed, and I still am. It is very good CGI for a fan film. But then when you really think about it, why even is this CGI? They could have just as easily put him in front of a green screen and then added some water effects for the rain. This did not need to be entirely digital, especially with those shots which are like 2 inches in front of his face. Like, you could have easily done that for real. Why is it CGI? Why are you wasting talent on this? And this is where I'd stop the flashbacks. The little bits of audio we get is more than enough, so I'd get rid of the Gwen flashback, and I'd also get rid of the Green Goblin flashback. Because 1, the costume in my opinion just doesn't look that great, and 2, because I think it'd be a lot cooler for him to be an ominous villain. Maybe just hear his voice, that's all. I would actually keep the Mary Jane flashback because it isn't just telling us something we already know. Although I would reduce its runtime, too much of this movie is just flashbacks. Next, with the Flash and MJ scene. You know, unironically, Flash might be the most likable character in this film, and that's definitely not a good thing. But oh my god, is this scene painful to sit through. It just goes on and on and on. Just cut it down. There's no reason for them to be talking for almost 6 minutes. So here's where we have a unique scene. Now I am trying to rewrite this movie without just creating a different movie entirely, but I think it is quite necessary here. Instead of Peter just receiving a letter at the graveyard, He instead finds the kid getting bullied and saves him, kind of like TASM 2. And the kid gives him a Spider-Man birthday card type thing. It would be that moment of levity this movie really needed. I'd place this scene directly after the scene where Peter's crying over Gwen, so it happens at his absolute lowest moment. So Spider-Man, feeling very sad and down, decides to give the kid a visit on his birthday. Turns out Spider-Man is the only one who showed up, and so the kid's ecstatic to see him there. The start of this scene I do like. It begins quite strong, but the moment Spider-Man starts to act all weird and depressed, I lose interest. I'd rewrite it so that Spider-Man still is sad, but when he sees all the stuff on the wall and the way the kid talks about him, he realizes he is appreciated. And then he lets out all the stuff about Gwen. It's less like he's trauma dumping and more like he's just getting something off his chest. That means I scrap all the flashback sequences and Spider-Man leaving the room. I'd keep the end of the scene mostly the same because it's actually good. And only as Spider-Man leaves does it reveal that the kid is terminally ill. This is far more impactful than just knowing he's terminally ill the whole time. Although I wouldn't show Timmy's grave because that's just unneeded in my opinion. Then the scene between Harry, Peter and MJ. It's just too long. I don't understand why every dialogue scene has to be plus 5 minutes. When the dialogue gets to the point, it makes you much more interested in what they're saying. When it comes to dialogue, less is more. And what you probably noticed is a lot of my rewrites to this film are just shortening scenes down. And finally, I change it so that Peter doesn't abandon his friends at the very end. This should be the moment they're all happy together again. So that's basically it. It's worth mentioning that there are some things I didn't talk about, like this movie's overuse of city establishing shots. And while I only mentioned the most egregious cases of dialogue going on too long, almost every single dialogue scene goes on for too long, so I'll just cut it down. And I understand that by no means is this a fixed movie. In order to do that, you would need to almost change the entire movie. This would just be a version of it that's just a little easier to sit through. Less flashbacks, less telling the viewers stuff they already know. A movie that just gets to the point more. This is the most stretched out movie I've ever watched. It's like it's constantly biding its time so it can hit that 2-hour mark. Even the credits just go so slowly. I still don't think the movie is actually that bad. I think it's got a lot of good ideas, it's just the execution of those ideas where the movie falters. I wish they put their money and resources into a 30-minute fan film that's really high quality, kind of like Spider-Man Cake Day. But for the cut down version, it would be about 1 hour and 20 minutes, which is a much more reasonable runtime. But yeah, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.